Hello everyone and welcome back to The Winning Agenda. My name is Jesse Muehlman-Marshall and today we're diving straight into Sorcery Contested Realm and we're coming up to the alpha launch, which is very exciting. So those of you who have ordered some Sorcery TCG on Kickstarter, hopefully you'll be receiving your product very soon. We've got content creators over the next couple of weeks, including myself, opening up some boxes or packs. We've got a few packs coming our way, I think, from Eric's Curiosa, which is great. So looking forward to opening those up for you guys to show you what is inside. But from what we know so far, I think we know about 370 out of the 400 cards in the set. I've put together the top 10 alpha spells. So for those of you a little more uninitiated with Sorcery TCG, the cards in the game are divided into Spellbook cards and sites, Atlas cards. So your sites are your resource cards, and in this video we're going to be we're excluding those sites, some of which are really powerful and will be very desirable, and we're just focusing on the spells. So these are the Spellbook cards, the action cards, the minions, the relics, the things you can see here on the screen. We're looking at the top 10 of those that you want to open. And in terms of how we determine this list, I've obviously played through the league, which you've seen on the channel, and thought about the cards that have been particularly powerful in constructed play. But I've also got a few cards on the list that I think there are a lot of different things that draw people to Sorcery TCG. Some of them are the artwork, iconic pieces of art, iconic artists, as well as the sort of flavor of the card or the wow factor of what it does. Even if it's not the number one most competitive card in the game in competitive play, it might just be one that people love to have in their collection. So let's dive straight in. Before we get started on the actual top 10 list, I wanted to make an honorable mention for the purposes of those of you looking to pick up some alpha product. I just really wanted you to be aware to keep an eye out for these things, because whilst these top 10 spells that I'm talking about here might be things that you should be cautious about trading away or giving away too cheaply, these couple of categories as well, curios and foils, are two other things that you're going to be able to find in your alpha packs. So foils on the bottom right there, we've got some examples from some of the Kickstarter updates that Eric's Curiosa has sent through. And these foils look fantastic. So they're rainbow foil with, you can't quite see because of the unfortunate quality of the stills from the video, but the name box, so the name of the card and the mana cost at the top, as well as the type line and the card text at the bottom, will have a border around them that is essentially cold foiled or stamped on, which is going to look fantastic. And then the obviously full rainbow foiling, which every card has a unique foil masking to try and accentuate the 3D nature of it. So the foils are going to look fantastic. It's going to be very obvious when you open a foil, not only because it's shiny, but also because on the card back it's going to be a full art non-foil version. So watch out for foils in your packs and definitely treasure those. Our good friend Hayne over at Wizard's Den YouTube channel, you should check Hayne out. An excellent mathematician has done some approximate numbers of how many of each foil there will be printed in alpha, and the numbers are pretty low. So even for low rarity foils, like ordinaries, you might actually be holding on to a foil that is quite rare and quite hard to come by in terms of total print numbers. Curios are the other thing to watch out for in alpha. So they're the top left image there. And what you can see is a sketch version of a card called Eric's Curiosa, the namesake of the company. And then to the right, you can see the art of just a slightly faded out of a card called Belfry, which is in the alpha set, but it's set out with a very different border to the border that we've got in the final version. Obviously, we've got largely borderless cards, and the text boxes are much smaller. And then to the right of that, you've got a very blurred out version of a tableau painting that's called Crusade Jihad either side, by Truett Parish, and it looks like that's going to also be some kind of earlier test version of that. So what these curios are is they'll be very rare. We don't know how many packs the frequency is with which these will drop, and they will be in any slot in the pack, and they're basically going to be things that highlight the history of the game's development. So when you're opening your packs of alpha, make sure you're sifting through every card carefully, and even comparing it with the version on Curiosa.io, which is the official card database. Because if you've got something that has a bit of a discrepancy or looks like it's got a different border, or it's this Eric's Curiosa card here is borderless and sketch, with no text on it, then you'll know that there's a very good chance you've snagged a curio. So keep an eye out for those when you're opening your packs. But we'll dive straight into the top 10 list in terms of the top 10 spells that I think you're going to want to open in your Contested Realm packs. This is the pack makeup. So this is what you can expect to open. So section 4, so I've cut that off slightly there on the top right. It's 3 exceptional cards at the front. Then you've got an elite card, and there's a 1 in 5 chance it's replaced by a unique. So you've got an elite or unique in every pack. So those are sort of the chase cards or the rares, if you like. And then you've got 10 ordinary cards, and there's a 1 in 4 chance that a single one of those is replaced by a foil, a premium foil / textless full art card. That's what I was mentioning. There's foil on one side and textless full art on the other of any rarity. And there's a small chance that one is replaced with a curio card. And then at the very back of the pack, you get one of the basic sites or an avatar. So that's the pack makeup. So onto the top 10 cards. So number 10, we've got Grapple Shot. And I mentioned that obviously I've played through the league, and part of the influence for this list is the league play and the standout cards there and the ones that people are going to be after. And Grapple Shot is 100% at the top of that list. So even though it's ordinary, so again, for those of you a little more uninitiated with Sorcery, the rarity of the cards is actually denoted on the type line there. So it says Ordinary Magic of Acrobatic Assault. So the capitalized words in that type line have game meaning, and the non-capitalized words are just for flavor. So magic is the card type, and ordinary is the card rarity. And the card rarity, ordinary, also means you can play 4 copies in your deck, but as you could see from the pack construction in the last thing that we looked at, the last photo, ordinary cards come 10 per pack, so they're a lot more common. So they're effectively, if you're going to analogize with opening a magic pack, they're your common cards. So to have a common in a 400 card set in the top 10, it has to be pretty good. And Grapple Shot is pretty good. So it's probably the number 1 magic spell in the early game in terms of the alpha metagame as it's shaken out. And it's just really, really hard to get away from having it in your deck if you're playing air, and air is one of the more powerful elements. So Grapple Shot makes it into the list at number 10. Watch out for these when you're opening your packs, and if you do happen to snag a foil Grapple Shot, don't just value that like any other ordinary card, because it's not. Number 9. We've got Earthquake. So Earthquake is an elite, so it's that single slot in the pack. You get either an elite or a unique in every pack. So an elite magic of violent upheaval. So it's another magic, so it's not if we were analogizing to magic again, it's not a creature or a permanent on the board. It's a spell, an instant or sorcery if you like, although in Sorcery, flavorfully at the moment, almost every spell is a sorcery. In magic parlance, there's only one that can be cast at quote-unquote instant speed. So Earthquake says, rearrange sites within a 2x2 region, carrying along everything of normal size, then burrow all minions and artifacts on those sites if able. So what this means is that you get to rearrange some sites, which is pretty powerful from a positional perspective as well within the game, because you can essentially bring things one step closer to you or push things one step further away, which can gain you a turn of tempo or get you a turn closer to dealing damage to someone from a place where they thought that you probably weren't able to do so. It also then burrows all minions and artifacts if able. And what that means is that if there are minions and artifacts on those sites that you're rearranging, then you're going to kill them unless they have the burrowing ability. And most minions in the alpha set don't have the burrowing ability, and a lot of minions played in most meta decks don't have the burrowing ability. So what Earthquake generally tends to play out as being is a 5-mana spell that gets you some positional advantage and kills everything in a 2x2 square on the board, which is can often be a targeted one-sided wrath if you set it up well. And that's, as we know from any card game, if you can get one-sided board wipes, that's extremely powerful. And at only 5 mana, which in Sorcery isn't really that much, Earthquake is extremely powerful. So that's one that I'll be watching out for sure. Coming in at number 8 on the list is Retanus Titan. So this is a 7 cost, so it's a bit more expensive. It's a 6 power minion, so it's the first minion that we've had. So it's an elite giant, makes an epic entrance. You can tell cards are minions, by the way, because they have that power and toughness in the top right-hand corner, so the power. In Sorcery, there's no differentiation between power and toughness, so something deals the same amount of damage as it can take before it's killed. So Retanus Titan deals 6 damage, and it can also take 6 damage before it's killed. So an elite giant makes an epic entrance. Genesis, which is basically when it comes into the contested realm, so when it comes into play, you strike each enemy here. So it deals 6 damage to each enemy that's at the location where it is summoned, which is an extremely powerful effect because 6 damage kills most other minions. There aren't many minions that have higher than 6 power in the base set. and getting to do it immediately as you come into play, as we know from many other games. If you get the ability to do something immediately, it's so much better than having to wait till your next turn, particularly in a game like Sorcery, where there's at the moment no way for your opponent to remove things on your turn. So if you can get an effect that affects the board on your turn, then you basically have free reign to make use of that changed board position before your opponent can react. So Ratana's Titan is an extremely potent, impactful card, and one that a lot of people will be playing in all sorts of control decks. It's obviously a bit on the expensive side in terms of mana, but it's also amazing artwork. I wanted to mention as well. So Tony Sildo, who's a Magic artist of long standing, who's done art for Magic for a long time, a very well-known fantasy artist, has done a really epic piece of artwork. I think if you look at all the detail of what's going on down the bottom at the Titan's feet there's some pretty gruesome stuff happening to some of those soldiers, but also the Titan itself just looks very cool in terms of the perspective and everything as well. So that's number 8. Number 7, we've got Grandmaster Wizard. So Grandmaster Wizard is, we all know the text draw 3 cards is powerful text. That's something that's ingrained into any card game player. This costs 6, so it's reasonably expensive, and it's a 0 strength minion. Now, minions that have 0 strength don't die immediately in Sorcery, so it can exist on the board. It just doesn't deal deal any damage if it gets into combat, and it can only receive 1 damage basically before it dies. It's an elite as well, so it's in that 1 per pack slot. It's a spellcaster, which means that there are some magic spells in the game, like sorceries, that when you play them, the effect is determined by the position of the caster, so they might only be able to affect a space that's within 1 or 2 steps of the unit casting it. Your avatar starts on the board and they can cast spells, but having other spellcasters that you can deploy elsewhere on the board, like the Grandmaster Wizard, is actually a useful piece of utility. So it being a spellcaster is relevant text, but the really important text is it says Genesis, draw 3 spells. So when it comes onto the battlefield, you draw 3 spells. Grandmaster Wizard sees heaps of play. It's a lot of fun. It's a card that I think is going to be fun, useful, awesome for a long time to come. And that artwork, I mean, the red background, the black, the cape, the gloves, everything about it is very cool. So I think Grandmaster Wizard has a lot going for it from a visual eye appeal perspective and from a gameplay perspective, and it's going to be well sought after. Number 6, and there's a few more of these as we go through, is a group of cards. So this is the avatars from the base set. So the avatars from the base set that are not the elemental avatars that come in the precons. So this is all the other avatars which you can open in the booster boxes. And it's important to note that the avatars in the booster boxes are going to be reasonably rare from what we understand. Now, obviously people will be free to proxy these for their casual play and what have you, but obviously having real copies of these cards is nice, and I think people are going to choose the ones that they like the most. On the right hand side, we've got Death Speaker and Battle Mage. Those are my personal favorites, but the others all have a lot going for them as well, and they are going to be well sought after, and particularly in foil. If you pick one of these up in foil, I think that's going to be one of the biggest chasers in the game, so do watch out for the avatar cards in your packs, and particularly watch out for the foil versions. At number 5, we've got Dream Quest, which is a very powerful tutor with a really interesting restriction on it. So it's a unique. This is one that is in the same slot as the elites in the pack. So it's one of these, either elite or unique per pack, but uniques replace elites in 1 in 5 packs. So they're a bit harder to pull. And it's a unique magic. And it says an allied spellcaster falls asleep and is disabled until hurt. At the start of your next turn, if it's still asleep, you may wake it up to search your spellbook for a card and put it into your hand, shuffle if needed. So it costs 1, and it lets you tutor on your next turn for any spell in your spellbook. The condition, though, is that you have to have a spellcaster who doesn't get damaged during your opponent's turn. So units wake up from sleep if they're damaged. And so you can use this on your avatar, for example. If you do it on turn 1, then you play it on your avatar. The avatar falls asleep, can't do anything for the rest of your turn. That doesn't really matter because you can do everything with the avatar you want to before you cast this. Then at the start of your next turn, the avatar wakes up and you get to tutor. Super powerful. And the only way that your opponent can disrupt that early in the game is by having a direct damage spell that they cast sort of across the board. So by playing this early, you're asking your opponent to basically use a direct damage spell reasonably inefficiently on your avatar if they want to stop you having a tutor for any card in your deck, which is pretty powerful. So Dream Quest, definitely a strong one. It does have that issue with being a turn slow if you draw it later in the game. You have to wait that delayed turn to draw the card, and it might be easy for your opponent to disrupt the Dream Quest by dealing damage to you. But certainly as an early game draw, it's a very, very potent and powerful effect. And I think as we see more combos and more strive for consistency in decks as the game goes on, Dream Quest is going to be one that people will be playing even more. So Pact with the Devil is a unique magic. It costs 4. And again, it's another unique. So it says sacrifice the caster or lose half your life rounding up. If you do, draw 3 cards. So again, another draw 3. You might see a bit of a theme there with Grandmaster Wizard. This one's unique. You can only have 1 in your deck. It's a fire card. It's got 2 fire thresholds, so you have to be reasonably deep into fire to be able to play this. But it is very, very powerful. So sacrificing a caster, so you could see that the Grandmaster Wizard, you could pay 6, play it, draw your 3 cards, and then you can play Pact with the Devil to sacrifice this Grandmaster Wizard that wasn't doing necessarily heaps for you on the board anyway, to draw another 3 cards. So that's very, very, very strong. It's a little bit cheaper than the Grandmaster Wizard in terms of the mana cost, 4 versus 6 for the draw 3 card effect, but you do have this additional restriction of having to sacrifice a spellcaster or lose half your life. Another thing to mention is that with the Death's Door mechanic in the game, if you're at Death's Door, you've got no life to lose, so you can lose half your life and it doesn't actually affect you at all, so you get this for free. So it's kind of flavorful that the closer you are to your desperate death, the easier it is to make a pact with the devil. And that's number 4. Number 3, we've got the Death Dealer. So this one is partly in there and partly this high because of the iconic Frank Frazetta artwork. So Frank Frazetta, you can see down the bottom, it's got copyright 1973. This is a classic piece of fantasy art by a classic fantasy artist who Sorcery TCG got on board as part of the Kickstarter process. And so the Frazetta estate, Frank unfortunately has passed away, but his family carries on the licensing for his artworks in fantasy properties, and Sorcery TCG was lucky enough to get the rights to use several of his art pieces on cards. And Death Dealer is one of the most iconic ones, I think, and certainly of his artworks and the cards that they are on, probably the one that's going to command the highest price, partly because it's a unique and because it's a very powerful effect. So it's a 7-cost minion with 4 power. It's a unique mortal, an artist of the afterlife, and it's got Genesis, so when it comes in, you kill all other minions. So that kills all minions regardless of whether they're on the surface or the subsurface, which is an effect that you don't necessarily get from other wrath effects in the game. A lot of them only affect the plane that the caster is on, whereas Death Dealer is just global. It kills absolutely everything. That does mean that it's a little harder, well, it's impossible really, to make it one-sided in the way that you can with some of the other wraths in the game, but just the universality of it and the fact that you're left with a 4-power minion afterwards makes it really, really strong. So Death Dealer, very strong from a gameplay perspective, extremely cool from an art perspective as well. And it's got some very neat flavor text to tie into the Frank Frazetta as well. So the next is number 2, we have the cores. So this is another cycle. So we had the avatars, and now we've got the cores. So the cores are basically mana rocks. So they're accelerants that you play early in the game. They're relics, so they are colorless. You can play them in any color, which again, for any card you're looking to assess the value of in a booster pack, we know that things that are colorless that can be played in any element, in any deck, are going to command a slightly higher price because they haven't got that restriction of where they can be played. They also assist you to splash, so they provide both threshold and mana acceleration. So if you play Ruby Core, for example, in a deck that's mainly earth, but is splashing a few fire spells, Ruby Core is another great way for you to both get acceleration, but also splash your fire threshold and hit your requirement to be able to play your fire spells. So all the cores, very powerful, 1 mana to then give you an additional mana every turn for the rest of the game is a great investment. You're happy to spend a mana on a card to do that in most games, and Sorcery is no different. Any game where you start with a core in your hand and you're 1 ahead of the mana curve, even if you're slightly behind on cards because you've had to play out the core, you feel pretty good about where you're going most of the time, and you can certainly construct your deck to make best use of those good hands. So number 2 is the cores. And I mean, it's worth mentioning that Melissa Benson, another classic Magic the Gathering artist, has just done an amazing job with these gems. Like the cores look incredible. The Onyx core, you can see, it's got the little indication of the element there on the core itself. The ruby core is the shape of the fire element. The amethyst core, you've got the air elements on the candles in the foreground, and the aquamarine core also is the actual shape of the water element as well. And just the starkness of the backgrounds, the creativity and softness of the gems, but also the sharpness and clarity of the amethyst and the aquamarine core. I just think these are outstanding pieces of art. So I can't wait to hopefully open some of these, and wouldn't they look amazing in foil? That's all I'll say on that. So number one, the top card that I think everybody is going to look forward to hopefully opening from Alpha in Sorcery TCG, it's going to, I dare say, be the highest price card in foil, and probably one of the highest price cards generally. Of course, it's the Philosopher's Stone. So another relic, so it can be played in any deck, it's in any color. It's unique, so it's in that hardest to find slot in the booster pack. It's got incredible art by Severine Pignot. It's just beautiful. The coloring on the stone itself, the border around it with the sort of snake Ouroboros action happening, and then all of the artworks in the background evoking some kind of Leonardo da Vinci ideas and a few other things as well, some other fantasy tropes and runes and symbols. It's just an incredibly detailed and deep piece of art. You could just stare at it for that, but from a gameplay perspective, it's very, very powerful. So like the cores that came in at number 2, the first spell of each element cast by the bearer costs 1 less. So it gives you that 1 mana acceleration for elemental spells. So that's anything that has a earth, fire, air, or water threshold requirement. So it doesn't apply to other relics, but it applies to all basically the other spells that we've seen. They cost 1 less if they're the first spell of that element that you've cast this turn. So if you're playing a multi-element deck, so if you've got air, fire, and earth spells in your deck, then the first air spell you play is discounted by 1 each turn, and the first fire spell is discounted by 1 each turn, and the first earth spell is discounted by 1 each turn. So you could potentially get 3 or even 4 discount at maximum every turn off this card for 1 mana upfront investment. That's just an amazing rate of return, and if you can make use of that, even just for 1 mana reduction every turn, it's good. But once you get up to 2 and 3, it takes over the game in terms of your capacity to outpace your opponent. So Philosopher's Stone, undoubtedly number 1 in terms of the number 1 chase card in Sorcery TCG in the Alpha set. But yeah, let me know what you think of the list that I put together. I know lots of other people have been testing out different decks in the league. People have different favorite artworks, different favorite cards. Chime in the comments, let me know what you enjoyed the most. Love to hear your thoughts. And if there's anything I missed, let me know as well. It's a massive set, and I'm sure there are other things that are going to leap out of the woodwork and be massive cards as well. So yes, please do like and subscribe to support the channel too if you enjoy this Sorcery content, to let me know that you enjoy it so that I can hopefully pump out some more Sorcery content in the future. And we'll see you all next time with hopefully a pack opening. We'll also have the top 10 Atlas cards coming up very soon as well. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.